The singing and speaking voice is greatly affected by the health and hearing ability of our ears. So, if we're serious about our voices, we need to know how to take care of these things on the side of our head. Today, I'm talking to Dr. Rebecca Grome, the audiologist and owner at Ears for You in Nashville, Tennessee. She's actually the doctor I trust with my own ears. So let me tell you a little bit about her before we meet her. This is Judy Rodman, your host for All Things Vocal podcast with game-changing vocal lessons and career-making advice from successful creatives and industry insiders. In today's episode, you'll learn things you probably don't know about your ears because your voice needs your ears. Stick around for the end of this episode where Dr. Grome shares some wild cases of ear issues she's seen. Dr. Rebecca Grome is a Tennessee licensed audiologist, current member of Academy of Doctors of Audiology, and the local audiologist for Dr. Cliff's Preferred Provider Network. She hails from Ohio and received her doctorate of audiology from the University of Cincinnati. Before heading her company Ears for You, she worked for a hearing aid manufacturer as an account executive. During that time, she trained audiologists on best practices for hearing aid fitting and helped facilitate better patient satisfaction. Dr. Grome has worked on international projects focusing on the future of the hearing aid industry and firmly believes that every patient deserves a customized and personal approach to their hearing health. And I can testify that that's true. So let's meet her. Welcome to All Things Vocal, Dr. Rebecca Grome.
Hi, Judy. Thanks for having me today.
Yes. May I call you Rebecca for this?
That's fine. Yes, please.
Okay. I'll probably call you Dr. Grome when I'm coming in for an appointment.
I answer to both.
Good. Yeah. Okay. First, let's get right down to the nitty gritty. Should we actually use Q-tips to clean wax out of our ears or not?
You can if you would like to keep me in business.
Good answer.
So it says right on the box, do not insert Q-tip into the ear. That old saying of you can't put anything in your ear smaller than your elbow bears true. Yeah, so most of the time when I look into someone's ear, I can see a little swirl or a little spot as to how far they're pushing their own wax down into their ear canal.
Wow.
Yeah. So for example, today I had someone that called in and they're like, yeah, I was doing okay. I used my Q-tip and now I can't hear anything. So they've just taken all of that wax and pushed it all the way back against their eardrum, and now we have to take it out. So if you want to keep me in business, you can use your Q-tips. Otherwise, leave them in the package.
Yeah, you don't want to have to use that tiny little ice cream scoop thing in there. Yeah.
No, that's less than pleasant, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I don't do the Q-tip anymore, so it's much easier for you to deal with me.
Yes. No, the big thing right now is people have those cameras. They have the cameras they can buy on Amazon, and then they try to like scoop their own stuff out.
Oh, man.
And I would say kudos to those who can do it without hurting themselves, but I would also just put out a fair warning that I've seen my fair share of trauma from that one
Oh,
too.
my
So let's
goodness.
just not stick anything in the ear.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Okay. All right. Great advice right up front. All right. Secondly, here, who is Dr. Cliff? Because I understand you have to be an exceptional audiologist to be on his preferred provider list, as you are.
Yes, Dr. Cliff is our resident YouTube audiology extravaganza. So he started on this crusade of a best practice protocol about 6 years ago, right when I bought my office. This is kind of crazy, but when you're an audiologist, there's all this equipment that we have to purchase, and there is a gold standard best practice protocol when we go from testing to fitting hearing aids. And even though it's taught to us during grad school,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times we're not following that protocol. A variety of reasons. Some audiologists are working for other people and therefore their employers are not purchasing said equipment to verify and validate. Some audiologists just weren't really taught that's how you do things.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of time and insurance. Insurance is really dictating how we do our jobs now. And so it gets a little sticky when we go to test someone and there's maybe a specialty test that we should be doing, but we know insurance isn't going to pay for it. And then that becomes an awkward conversation.
Yeah.
So Dr. Cliff started this YouTube channel way back when YouTube channels were just getting going. And he is a very trusted source within the hearing aid industry. And a lot of people
Mhm.
go to him for resources. And I have known him for a very long time. And so when he started this network of like minded audiologists who kind of proclaim to do it the right way, that's how I got hooked up with him. And so in this office, we proclaim that we are purchasing all the necessary equipment to do things the right way and that we're following this protocol as close as we can for every patient.
When should a singer or speaker think about getting their ears checked out? What are the signs they should do that?
I think a baseline is great at any age. And I know a lot of people cringe at like, oh, we don't want to use baseline, but I love a baseline hearing test. I don't care how old you are. If you have noise exposure, I want a baseline hearing test. And then based on that, and based on your age, and based on your noise exposure, then we can make a decision. Is this something we're going to do every calendar year? Is this going to be every 2 years? Is this going to be every 5 years?
Mhm.
It varies per person.
You and I had that conversation. We sure did.
Yes. So usually once there's hearing loss present between 250 and 8,000 hertz,
Hmm.
or when the patient is over the age of 50, then we recommend annual testing.
Gotcha. Okay, for those listening who might never have had a hearing exam, and yes, they exist because I didn't have one forever, we just kind of take it for granted, these things. Uh, Take us through that first office visit. What do you do?
So the first office visit involves just kind of sitting down and talking about noise exposure, symptoms, if there's any. A lot of times people with noise exposure or some in the music industry, they have ringing in their ears. So we talk a little bit about that. How often does it happen? Is it bothersome? Is it in response to noise exposure? So we take a pretty nice case history just so I get a vibe of kind of what we're working with and what
Mhm.
potential symptoms we might run into or that we need to address. And then we take a look in the ears with a video otoscope. That way we can see all the way down to the eardrum, make sure there's no occluding wax in there, make sure that the eardrum looks healthy.
Mhm.
And as long as there's no report of fullness and pressure, and as long as the eardrum looks healthy, then we just put straight in the booth and we'll do a pure tone test where you just press the button whenever you hear a beep or a
Mhm.
tone in either ear. Again, sometimes depending on the age, sometimes depending on, hey, I have symptoms of hearing loss, or I'm starting to notice I struggle in background noise,
Mhm.
then we'll add on some additional testing to make it more of a diagnostic process. Otherwise, for your standard musician coming in baseline or to monitor their hearing, we're doing just pure tones out to 20,000 hertz. So you're just pressing the button whenever you hear a beep or a tone. We're looking for the softest you can respond to sound, and then we'll review those results with the patient and then kind of come up with a game plan moving forward. So again, talking about, are we going to redo this in 12 months? What does your tour schedule look like? Are you wearing in-ear monitors? Are you wearing earplugs? So all of that kind of goes into that first appointment just to kind of discover what we're working with. And then, we come up with a game plan for the next few years to monitor that.
Yeah. So it really is important for people in the music business or the music industry, players and singers. We really do need to get checked out, right? I mean, because
Yeah,
our lifestyle is all about sound.
that's correct. And I will say a lot of musicians are very in tune to their hearing
Hmm.
and they use it as a reference. And that's challenging because when you're sick, everything up here is swollen and
Uh-huh.
your reference is off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Or, typically with hearing loss, that happens progressively and slowly over a length of time.
Hmm.
So if you're relying on your own hearing for reference, over 10 years, that might change,
Hmm.
especially during COVID. We just had a lot of sudden hearing losses that were viral.
Yeah.
If someone's coming to me for the first time and they're like, oh, yeah, this left ear is not normal or it's not right, I have nothing to compare it to. I don't know what normal or right was. So it's really hard for me to make a diagnosis or even get them in urgently to another provider because there's just no reference. So to me, it's very important to have that baseline, even if you're not having any problems, because I hate to say it, at some point you're probably going to have a problem, whether that's earwax, whether that's a acoustic trauma, whether that's a big tour that you go on and you have a, monitor engineer that's doesn't know what they're doing. Everyone, that conversation comes up a lot.
Even with studio, every once in a while, the gear will malfunction. It just did for me a couple of days ago. I was in
Oh
the
yeah.
studio and something happened, and one sound, one frequency sizzled like laser beamed through all of the equipment, including my headphones. And
Yes.
so for a little bit, that ear was a little bit like, I don't want to hear anything right now.
It's a little off. Yeah.
Just a tiny little bit off, and it came back, thank God. But yeah, it's kind of a hazardous duty lifestyle for our ears in the occupation we're in. So speaking of in-ears, which you just spoke of, how important is it to wear both ears? Because people don't want to, they can, I know exactly why. They want to hear the ambient sound of the stage, of the people and their voices and the instruments, like an acoustic ambiance version of what's going on. And they have to get used to putting those things in both ears. But how important is it to figure out how to do that?
It is very important to keep both in. I've had a few very tricky unilateral in-ear monitor users recently, and I will always say, you have to do what you do, whatever you need to do to perform at the level that you're comfortable and able to perform at. And then we'll monitor everything else on the back end.
Hmm.
So I truly believe that you need to keep both of them in so we can keep things even. Also, it brings your stage noise down. It brings the overall
Yeah.
output of the in-ears down.
Hmm.
Usually when you take one ear out, you tend to turn the other one up to compensate for that external noise. There's definitely ways around it. There's ambient ports that you can get in your monitors now.
Right.
You can have your monitor engineer put in some stage mics. There's a lot of different ways to get around it.
What I do about it is just take both ears a little bit out where I can hear the leakage of the
Yeah.
ambient sound, but in both ears, not just the one.
Yes. And also, especially if you're a vocalist or you're in the studio, you probably get a good 15 to 20 dB of occlusion up until about 1,000 hertz. And so, especially if you're trying to sing or vocalize, that can
Hmm.
really change your perception of what's coming out of your mouth.
Hmm.
So, again, understand the
Yeah.
importance of wearing both, but you have to do what you have to do to get your
Yeah.
job done.
Well, while we're talking about that, let's talk about something I do all the time and have done my whole 50-year studio career. And that is, I like to wear half of an ear off so I can hear some acoustic sound from the vocal booth in there and ground me in the center of pitch.
Mhm.
How dangerous is that? Is it, we're talking the same thing?
Again, it's as long as we're monitoring a hearing test and
Yeah,
making sure that things aren't changing, I'm okay with that.
great. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'll change the ear I'm doing that with.
Ideally, that would be the way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, if it's a long studio day.
Yeah. So I just had an artist who consistently pulls one of his in-ears out. Same thing as a vocalist,
Hmm.
huge international tour. He feels disconnected from, the crowd if he has
Yeah,
both of them in, no matter if we have a stage mic or whatnot.
yeah.
So we just monitor his hearing. And until I see that there's a difference in hearing between the two ears or one ear is changing versus the other ear, then I'm leaving him alone.
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
awesome. A
Mhm.
doctor who actually listens to the patient about what the patient needs to do with their ears. Oh, yeah, I like that a lot.
Again, a gold standard is a gold standard because it's for the norm. There's always going to be outliers. And like you said, for my bio, I truly believe that as long as there's an open line of communication and a general awareness and
Hmm.
like a game plan, essentially, then who am I to tell you how to do your job? So,
Well, how important and how effective is it that we actually give our ears some silence, like a walk in the woods or actually complete silence, like for a day or something like that? Sometimes it's helpful for the voice to take some time off.
yeah.
Do the ears recover with silence?
So that's a slippery slope conversation because I think a lot of people can take what I'm saying and then say, oh, well, my hearing loss will get better.
Ah,
When we have noise exposure, we have ear fatigue from an anatomy standpoint.
gotcha.
There's an excess of mitochondria that is built up in the ear, and those hair cells get all necrotic because they're overexposed. And so that's when you leave a noisy area and your hearing is muffled and you have that intense ringing. It's
Yeah.
because your hair cells are like this and they can't move the way that they should. Now, the body then, in time of rest, will naturally move that mitochondria out of the ear, and
Huh.
then your hair cells will go back to moving appropriately. Therefore, if you have ear fatigue or listening fatigue, you will recover from that when you have a time of silence. Yes.
Gotcha.
Now, if you have hearing loss and you go into 10 years of silence and you don't stimulate your ear, of course, from a perceptual standpoint, things are going to sound louder
Mm-hmm.
because you've been deprived.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have hearing loss or damage present, typically it doesn't come back. Most people in the music industry have a certain level of ear fatigue. So just having a few days rest or of relaxation, meditation, stretching, exercise, working on blood flow, that's ultimately the benefit of what you're giving yourself is the perception of better hearing.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Cause if I've got a 10 and a 2, God forbid a 6 of singing in the studio, by that afternoon, my ears are tired and I need to switch something up. I need to switch my mix up. I need to
Mhm.
switch my volume, maybe back it off or bring it up or switch my live or just change it up or something so that the perception, it's almost like splashing cold water in my face and it kind of wakes my ear up a little bit.
Yeah.
So that truly makes sense. Ear fatigue is not ear damage. Ear fatigue is recoverable. Ear damage is not. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to be careful when we start getting a lot of ear fatigue because that then is probably cumulatively moving towards hearing loss, right?
Correct. So we have that conversation a lot of, I'm going to use those who play down on Broadway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes they're not in charge of their own mix. Sometimes they're not in an appropriate product. And so they'll play 4 nights in a row
Yeah.
and their ears will just be screaming the
Mhm.
day after. And then they'll have 3 nights off or they'll do something else for 3 days. And all of a sudden their ringing goes away and their muffling goes away. That's because they're experiencing a temporary threshold shift. Again, the ear is temporarily overstimulated. And when that happens over and over and over and over and over for 10, 15, 20 years, eventually that leads to permanent hearing loss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just a breakdown at the cellular level of the anatomy of the ear.
Gotcha. All right. Now I want you to talk to me a little bit about pitch accuracy, and about tone deafness.
Mm.
I'm not sure that's even a thing unless you're deaf. You're truly deaf. But I've witnessed virtually tone deaf people that really had no sense of key or pitch. I've witnessed them actually gain the sense of being able to sing in tune by some significant, I mean, we're talking a lot of pitch practice, of aiming at a pitch target and hitting it with someone telling them if they hit it or not. So it's very much like aiming anything, the more they practice, the better they get. So what I wanted to know is, how does the ear learn? Can it, like I've always supposed, grow new neural synapses through the brain and through the ear and connecting the ear and the brain and the voice so that they can do things that they couldn't do before?
Yeah, so the ear itself, tone deafness is more in the brain. It's a perception thing.
Ah,
It's an auditory thing,
in the brain.
in the
Okay.
brain. Yeah,
Gotcha.
so someone who's walking in the door who's tone deaf, they have
Huh?
no, again, it's reference. They have no reference of getting there. But with practice, yes, you can essentially establish new neural pathways within the brain. You can teach yourself
Wow.
up here in your brain that this signal is associated with this. It's not coming from the ear.
Wow. Okay, that's excellent. The brain's got to learn some oral colors and how to aim at them. I've always thought like its ear It's ear to brain to vocal cords, not ear to vocal cords. I've always said that because a 3-step pitch practice that I've used that has worked has been for them to listen to something first, but with like earbuds in or headphones, really listen. And the second step is mime it. So they're imagining that pitch. And then the third step is lightly singing it and getting somebody to check and see if they're actually on it. Because a lot of times people that are tone deaf aren't really listening to the music, even though they think they are.
Mhm.
And then the more they do it, the better they get at it. Does that make sense?
So the first thing I thought of was the Suzuki method.
Ah,
That's what I took when I took piano lessons. I had to listen
huh,
to the music on tape or, cassette tape back
yeah.
then. And then I got the music
Mm-hmm,
from a visual standpoint.
mm-hmm.
And then the music was removed, and I had to figure it out in my brain based on what I was used to hearing.
Yeah. Wow.
So, yes, that is I think that's a method that is commonly used specifically for piano and violin. So, absolutely.
Cool.
And same thing, it's like if you are not a good I'm thinking me, I'm not a good singer. I can sing, I'm not good, but if I really think about hitting a note, I can hit it much better in my head than I can in my voice. I'm sure, just by modifying what muscles I'm using, I'm sure I can get there, but
Yes. Yeah. My husband is a drummer and he can tune timpani perfectly. He was in the symphony at one point and he can tune timpani perfectly, but sing on pitch? No. And the thing is, he doesn't want to. He does not want to learn to sing. So he absolutely won't even do it. But I know he knows he could if he tried.
yeah.
But that's funny because he knows when I'm out of tune.
I'm sure it tells you too.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can't get by with nothing. He also knows when I'm not in the pocket. Yeah, he's iron sharpens iron there. But anyway, let's talk about tinnitus because a lot of musicians have had that issue. It's really sad when it's a really serious problem. It's such a strain and a stress. Is there any help for tinnitus on the horizon, or do you know of any?
Yeah, we're definitely making stride in that category. I will say that it's sad to me that a lot of people don't come to me with the report of the symptom until it's already not too late, but already creating major health issues.
Yeah.
So, I always tell people the perception of an internal head sound is pretty normal. Most people, if you stop them on the street and be like, "Hey, have you ever heard ringing in your ears?" They're gonna be like, "Oh yeah."
Yeah.
It's the reaction to that ringing that is not good. And that when we have to start kind of intervening from a medical standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of different protocols available,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not a one size fit all thing. So pretty
Yes.
much every single time someone comes in here and I do an intake questionnaire about like, what does it sound like? What are your symptoms? How is it affecting you?
Mm-hmm.
XYZ. It's very rare that I can just copy and paste the
Wow.
treatment plan for the
Wow.
patient because it really does affect everyone differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so the more recent research is really leaning towards bimodal stimulation. Bimodal stimulation is, for example, listening to a specific track through a headphone
Mm-hmm.
and then getting either an electronic stimulus somewhere else on your body. And that way in your brain, it kind of speeds up the breaking up of that internal head sound, which is kind
Wow.
of what we're doing with usually hearing aids and sound generators is we're auditorily breaking up the internal head sound and trying to tone down the perception of the tinnitus. You don't ever turn off the tinnitus. It's never going to go away, but
Mm-hmm.
your perception of it will change. That's our goal.
Wow.
And
Mm-hmm.
so right now there's a lot of updated research on bimodal stimulation to help kind of speed up the process of breaking up that strong neural response in your brain.
That sounds like creative approaches to pain in general that you need to do when you're dealing with patients. Everybody you need creative solutions that you can try on and until you find what works. Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, not most musicians, a large population of musicians have an obsessive compulsive personality. You
Oh,
know,
yeah.
they're very type A. They're perfectionist,
Yeah.
a lot of low self-esteem,
Mhm,
a lot of anxiety,
mhm.
a lot of depression, a lot of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, stress,
Yep.
poor general health habits.
Mhm.
So it's really challenging when someone comes to me with normal hearing and bothersome tinnitus when I see that they're not eating well and they're overweight and they're unfortunately drinking a lot or
Mhm.
not getting enough sleep or, just kind of stressing their body.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of tinnitus can be addressed um, with general health
Wow, and see,
improvements.
that's the same for the voice. The voice
Mhm.
is attached to the rest of you, and you can deal with issues. You can even with phlegm, if you've got good technique and you've got some good energy, you can sing what I call it you singing above the lava. But if you don't have the energy to get up there, you're going to be plowing through all that stuff.
Yeah.
Anyways, fascinating. Okay, I think I may have told you this at our appointment. I feel like I hear differently out of my left and right ears. Is there a reason for that? Or does one of my ears have a touch of hearing loss? I think we found out it did. Also, can our ears take partial sound information and fill in the blanks like our eyes do with pixelated TV and computer screens?
Yes, absolutely. So my spiel when patients come to me with hearing loss and they don't know that they have hearing loss,
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
which is most of them. The conversation goes, "Hey, have you ever been talking to someone and you say, huh, or what? And then before they can ask you the question again, you answer the question. And it's huh and what. You think of when you're giving a presentation.
Yeah.
Huh or what is a placeholder for your mind to kind of catch up to your mouth. And so when you're talking to someone, based on the configuration of your hearing loss, you're going to be missing out on certain letters and sounds and vowels and frequency spectrums. But your brain can figure that out based on context, based on the subject of what you're talking about. But it's like playing Wheel of Fortune. You might fill in the blanks wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yes, your brain can fill in the blanks of your hearing. And that's why I think a lot of times it takes people on average 7 to 10 years before you get your hearing tested because you're having a hearing problem. It's
Mhm,
because we are very good at using our visual cues to fill in the blank. We're very good at using body language.
mhm.
And then our brain just naturally will fill in the blank for most. You can figure most things out. It's just general problem solving. And that became more and more evident during COVID when we had the mask. Once the mask was removing the visual cues. We had a lot of people who were like, "Oh, you know what? I'm actually really reading lips. I'm not hearing." So yeah, again, there's so much of hearing that is in the brain.
That is fascinating. Guys, that sounds like to me that if you even have a question in your mind, or even if you don't have a question in your mind, get a baseline evaluation. If you're serious about your voice, you need to be serious about your ears. And I'm talking to
Absolutely.
myself as well. Okay, so you told me something really interesting at our appointment. I was talking about having difficulty hearing dialogue on the television, and I know that's one of the first signs of hearing loss. So I kind of worried about it, but especially with TV shows. And you told me something pretty interesting about some practices that are going on with the business of TV recording or filming the movies. Can you tell us about that to make us feel a little bit better about our ears?
Yeah, so especially in movies and TV shows where they're on a tight production schedule, a lot of times they're adding in the vocals later. And so because of trying to get the best visual shot,
Yeah.
if the boom mic's not in the right spot or whatever, because it's creating a shadow, they will have to go back in and add in whatever audio they got. And so a lot of times the actual audio of production right now is taking a back seat to overall production time and getting it released. And there was an article that came out right before COVID, so probably 2019 or so, that was
Hmm.
talking about the changes in how production goes with TV shows.
Hmm.
And there was an updated article that just came out last week about this as well. talking
Ah,
about how there's a big movement to ensure that the audio portion is getting addressed because there's so many people who are not watching certain shows, and there's actually ratings that have been dropping because of poor audio quality on some mainstream shows.
awesome. Yeah. When that keyboard pad is so loud and all you're doing is having to read lips,
Yeah.
if they're moving their lips, which some actors don't do that very well and drives me nuts. But
Mhm.
anyway, then yeah, this is like, why am I watching this? Or at least, put the words up on the TV.
Yes, closed captions are great. They're
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it's a it's a bit of a distraction. You don't
It
feel
is. It's a little bit of an emotional removal. Yeah. Hmm. Okay. So tell me about some types of hearing aids and when should a person get one? I know that's a loaded question, but uh,
I always tell people when they come into my office, I don't really care how much hearing loss you have. You have a social impairment due to your hearing. I'm going to recommend treatment, which is a hearing aid. So even if it's normal hearing per se,
mhm.
but on the lower side of normal, there's a 35 dB range of normal hearing. And
Wow.
if you're flat across at 20 dB, that's still normal hearing. But to me,
Wow.
if you're having a social handicap and you have a 20 dB hearing loss, I'm going to recommend hearing aids.
Yeah.
So to me, it's a combination of things. It's, are you realizing that you're having a problem? Can you give me some specific examples that you're having a problem? Are your friends and family saying that you have a problem?
Hmm.
And can you talk on the phone? If you
Hmm.
cannot talk on the phone, I'm going to recommend some sort of amplification for you because to me, that's a safety hazard. There's a variety of different hearing aids and they're getting smarter and smarter, but there's a level of annoyance with every hearing aid on the market. And it's something that you're going to have to clean and it's something you're going to have to maintain and put in your ear. And it sounds unnatural because it is, it's a computer. And most people have high frequency hearing loss. Well, hearing aids sound tinny because we're supplementing the high frequency hearing loss.
Hmm.
So the short answer is if you tell me you have a problem, I'm going to recommend hearing aids. If you have severe hearing loss and you don't tell me you have a problem, I'm probably still going to recommend hearing aids, but I'm not going to be very pushy about it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I, guys, when I went to her, we discovered that I've been wearing headphones for 50 years, so I'd be shocked if I didn't have a little bit of hearing loss, but it's not affecting my work. It's not affecting my pitch. It's not affecting me hearing you. I mean, I do turn the Zoom's audio up, but
Mhm.
as long as I can do that, Dr. Grome is telling me I'm cool until I'm having a problem helping you, or
Mhm.
I'm having a problem hearing pitch and stuff like that. So, so far, so good, but I'm going back once a year myself. So I'll be back to see you in a few months. Okay, so that's great information. How worried should somebody be about needing tubes in their ears for ear infections and, chronic sinus infection, stuff like that? Tell me your feelings about tubes in your ears.
Well, tubes are a blessing because they will create a level of consistency with your hearing. If you need tubes, it tells me that you're having reoccurring ear infections, a varying degree of fluid behind your ear, whether that's watery, whether it's mucousy. The problem with that is we don't have consistency in your hearing. So when there's tubes that are put in, usually just having that open pathway there, you're going to get a change in the perception of sound because we're opening up and the eardrum is just not conducting sound the way it used to. But at least it's going to be a consistent sound.
Hmm.
And so, it's one of those things that I go for consistency. And typically a hole in your ear from a tube heals up much nicer than a perforated eardrum from an ear
Ah,
infection.
gotcha.
So we're controlling the opening and we're controlling the healing process. Whereas if you rupture your ear because you had an ear infection and you go on an airplane, who knows where that's going to rupture.
Yeah.
And so there's different areas of the eardrum that, if you rupture it in the top portion, kind of where that bone connects,
Hmm.
it's going to be a much different healing process than if you have a little slice at the bottom with a tube in it.
Well, that makes me wonder if possibly her eardrum was ruptured before they even put the tubes in. So
Correct.
I
And
don't know.
so
Yeah.
someone who had ear infections as a child and now they're, having a hard time with pitch and things like that.
Hmm.
There's so many different things that could happen. She could have scar tissue in there.
Hmm.
Same thing if there was a rupture during childhood, there might be a little extra scar tissue right where the bone connects. And so it could be a conductive thing where the sound isn't being conducted into the ear appropriately because the first part of your hearing is mechanical. The second part is sensory. So there's a few different like moving targets there from a mechanical standpoint that could be off
Gotcha.
with someone. But it's a hard one because especially, growing up as a kid, some kids just have to go through a few
Yeah.
set of tubes before they get over that ear infection phase.
Yeah. People ask me about getting their tonsils out. Is that going to change their voice? And they get really worried about that. But the truth is, in my experience, everybody that's needed that and had it done, it would only help because their health was better and it didn't change. It really, if anything, it opens up access to resonation
Yeah.
because that swollen tissue is gone. So, yeah, that's great. That's great to know. All right. What's the weirdest ear problem you've ever dealt with? Okay. Especially having to do with musicians, if you can think of something.
Oh gosh. It's mainly stuff that I pull out of ears.
Oh,
I have a very lovely Google photo file of things that I have pulled out of people's ears. Yeah, so I mean, there's anything from bugs to I pulled a Barbie shoe out of someone's
oh
ear
my
that had been in
gosh.
there. This man was, I think, 32, 33, and that had been in his ear since he was 7. Yeah.
Okay. That's weird. Yeah.
Yes, a live spider is the worst one. That's
Oh
gross.
man.
A moth. Lots of Q-tips. This was a good one for a musician. They were on tour and they needed new in-ear monitors and they thought they could do their own impressions, their own molding. And I think any in-ear monitor company or earplug company that sends out impression material for at-home use should be out of business. I'm sorry, but I just don't get it.
Oh my God. Okay. Word to the wise.
Yeah, so he did his own impression and I think it was September and he came to see me and it was like March or April. And he's like, "Yeah, I've been having problems with this ear ever since like September." And I'm like, "Gosh, what happened around September?" Is it, thinking it's wax and everything. I look in his ear and it's impression material.
Oh my God.
Take it out of there. And he's like, "Oh, has that really been in there since September?" I'm like,
Uh,
"You tell me, buddy. You tell me."
oh. Oh, man. All right. Well, to sum this up, I do want to ask you for a last little red flag warning here. You've said it, but just tell us again. Can real hearing loss be recovered?
No, it's permanent.
Yeah. So take care. Take care of your ears. Where can people go and reach you and get your services?
Sure. Yes, I'm in the Berry Hill neighborhood and now the Cool Springs neighborhood of Nashville, Nashville, Tennessee. It is earsforyou.net. It's EARS, the number 4, the letter U.net. We do have some social media pages that are linked up on our website. And then people can always reach out through our website and we can text them back or email them back or set up telehealth appointments.
Great. And I'll leave links to all of that.
Perfect. That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
This has been incredibly valuable information for anybody who has ears on the side of their head, but definitely for people who make music and have those ears. So thank you for being with me and doing this for All Things Vocal.
Thanks, Judy. I appreciate it.
See you soon.
Okay, sounds good.